When do I quit? I don't like my job. It's soul sucking. But when do I quit? And when do I leave? And when do I take that leap and look for something else? We need criteria to know how to make our decisions. This applies to all of our life. It applies to work and home and relationships and health and even our day-to-day lives. Whatever's draining you and bringing you down, imagine not having that in your life anymore. Not having that partner, not having that boss, not having that commute, not having that lack of appreciation for your work, whatever it is, imagine not having it anymore. How do you feel? That right there is your answer to stay or to go. You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This episode is titled, When It's Out with the Old and In with the New in Life. I often get asked, Jim, when do I stop doing XYZ? I'm sick of my job. It's soul sucking. My marriage isn't working anymore. I've been married a lot of years. It doesn't work. I want to move somewhere. I want to do something different in life. But when do I do it? So in this episode, I want to talk about some criteria about out with the old and when it's time to bring the new stuff into your life. Keep listening. So as I said in the introduction, people often ask me, when do I quit? And generally it's in two areas, meaning it's in work and it's in their personal relationship. And when it comes to work, people are often wondering, when do I quit? I don't like my job. It's soul sucking. But when do I quit? And when do I leave? And when do I take that leap and look for something else? I see this overwhelmingly in personal relationships. When do I quit? Now, I could do a much longer episode on the personal relationship category in this episode, but I won't for right now, because there's something that also that prompted this particular episode, which I'll talk about in just a bit. Because in my own life, I've looked before, at different times as when do I quit something? When do I quit relationships? Meaning people that I have in my life, or even my personal relationship at one point in the past, many years ago. And I look at, what I recognized is I didn't have any criteria. I didn't have any criteria for knowing, okay, when you get to this threshold, this is when you quit. And that's what I want to talk about today. So when I talk about that word threshold, I'm also talking about criteria. And we need criteria to know how to make our decisions. But this applies to all of our life. It applies to work and home and relationships and health and even our day-to-day lives and things that we do. Speaking of that word criteria, many years ago, I had a friend of mine, his name was Harry, and I've told this story before, but we're on, I don't know how many episodes now. And he said, Jim, my marriage isn't working. I'm not happy. And I said, how long have you been married? And he said, 7 years. And he said, my wife is bipolar. And what will happen is she will get on medication and she'll be great for 3 months. And then she goes back into the not so great for 3 months, and then great for 3 months, and then not so great for 3 months. And he said, when it's not so great, it's extraordinarily challenging and it beats me down. And I said, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I want to leave. He goes, I've been doing this for a long time. I can't do it anymore. I want to leave, and he came up with different excuses. And that's what many people do with their personal lives and their professional lives is they want to leave, they want to change, but. And I said, well, how long has this been going on? And he said, it's been the same pattern for 7 years. And I said, how come you stay? And he said, which is, most of us do this. He goes, well, I'm hoping that it gets better. And I said, hoping is one thing, but how will you know? What criteria do you have in place to let you know that if by XYZ criteria, it's not better, it's time to go? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you've done this for 7 years, 3 months good, 3 months bad, 3 months good, 3 months bad. Repeat that times 7. When do you know to get off the merry-go-round? And he said, I don't know. That's why I'm talking to you. And I said, you need criteria, meaning what does she have to look like in the relationship? What criteria have you established for her in the relationship? And then I went a lot deeper. Does she know about it? Counseling, all these kind of things, but that's not where I want to go in this episode. And his big criteria was time. He's like, I am so tired of doing this. He goes, I'm worn out. I don't think I can do it anymore. So I knew that time was a big criteria of his. And I said, okay, so you're hoping she gets better. And he was a very attentive kind of husband. And so I knew that he was doing his best to take care of her. And I said, okay, you're hoping it's going to get better. Well, the reality is when we hope things are going to get better, rarely do they ever get better. And I said, okay, what's your criteria to know, because he's working by time, what's your criteria to know when to leave the relationship? And he said, I don't know. Meaning he did not know. He didn't say, I don't know as well. I don't know. It's open-ended. He said, I don't know as in I don't have any criteria. And I said, well, you need criteria. And that criteria is that at a certain amount of time, you're going to determine that time, but at a certain amount of time, you're going to invest yourself fully into the relationship, helping her heal and trying to help her get to a place where it can be a healthy relationship for both of you. And he goes, okay, I will roll up my sleeves, I'll bite the bullet, and I will give it 1 year. And I said, so what you're saying is at the end of 1 year, if you're living in the same pattern, the same cycles for 1 more year, that for you is your cue and your indication that it's time to leave. He said, yes. So I knew this guy for several years. A year later, nothing had changed. And he remembers setting the criteria that he gave it 1 year. Nothing changed significantly. Patterns were still repeating themselves. He didn't want to do it anymore. So at that 1 year point, he said, okay, I'm not hoping anymore. I'm done. It's time to leave. And he did. And today he's very, very, very happy because he moved to a relationship that nurtured him and wasn't pulling him down. It wasn't just completely emotionally draining and emotionally taxing. Now, I don't know where you are in your relationships, and no one can tell you to stay or leave, or even in your work. But I just want to share some thoughts with you, some criteria about let's put a frame on it. So you have a better thought frame from which to make your decisions. Many years ago, a good friend of mine, she was a coach of mine. Her name is Peggy Dean. She's in her upper 80s now. She was an NLP trainer. She was literally a globally impactful coach, coaching American presidents and et cetera. And one day we were friends. We worked together for about 20 years. And I said, Peggy, how do you know when to leave a relationship? And without thought, she goes, oh, that's easy. Her criteria was very simple criteria. Is my life better with this person? And or is my life better without this person in my life? Now, what I do want to share here, Peggy was very good at understanding relationships and skills and knowing that it takes two to tango and they have to grow. So basically what she was saying, if she's exhausted her capacity to be supportive in the relationship and it's not working and she's not seeing any change on the other side, even after being fully nurturing, she's decided her life is better off without this person and it's time to go. I'll talk more about that in just a bit. I often hear people saying, but what about people in my life, my family? And many times we feel obligated to our family, even when they're not good for us. And generally, it's out of guilt. People would say, I'm going to feel bad. I mean, it's my mother, it's my father. They are extraordinarily toxic, but what can I do? It's my mom and my dad. Former student of mine said something many years ago, and I love the quote. Her name was Nicole, and I worked with her 8 years ago. And actually, she just came back recently to start working with me again on different things. And she said, which I think is a very profound, very simple statement. She said, just because we share DNA doesn't mean we need to share time and space together. Think about that. Just because we share DNA doesn't mean we need to spend time and space together. But many people think because they share DNA, they are then obligated to share time, space, holidays, and all these kind of things. And that is not true. So the way that I look at it, and this might not work for everyone, but the way that I look at it is like Peggy. Am I better off with XYZ people in my life, Or am I better off with them not in my life? I mentioned before, I've mentioned it many times, my dad was an alcoholic. And when I was 22, I graduated from college. My dad was very toxic by that point. And I'd recognized that my life, without the guidance, I didn't know Peggy back then, but I'd recognized that my life would be better without my father in it. He is such a toxic influence that it's not healthy to keep this extraordinarily unhealthy man in my life. And I decided to create space. I didn't want him in my life anymore. And that's when we parted. But I had to look out for, which I'll talk about in a moment. I had to look out for my own well-being, my own mental health. And I knew that being in a relationship with my father was not conducive to a good level of healthy mental health. So even though I used, personal lives as an example, I see many people that are professionally questioning whether or not they want to do what they do any longer. Maybe it's the industry, maybe it's the company, maybe it's the people in the company, which is what I want to look at. So, time to leave a job. What you want to look at is there fulfillment or is there a lack of fulfillment? Is there constant mental stress? Or am I constantly distressed at work? And here's a big one. Maybe not as emotionally impactful as the mental distress or the lack of fulfillment, but burnout and overwhelm. And I cannot tell you, doing what I do, I get a massive amount of correspondence from people in the podcast, people in my programs, and I've got a half a dozen different programs that are running simultaneously. And the amount of people that take jobs because they want a job, and they will say something like, this job is soul sucking. It is sucking the life out of me. I hate my job. I think back to when I lived in New York City back in 1998 through 2001, or into 2002 almost, about 4 years. And when I went to New York, I took a very high paying corporate job on Madison Avenue. I was recruited. I didn't want to live in New York. And I took which would be equivalent of about $700,000 today with inflation. And I was chasing the money. I took the job for the money. And I did think that I would enjoy it. I thought, because I didn't do enough exploration about it, but I thought I would enjoy it. And I hated it. I hated it. I remember one Sunday night thinking, shit, I've got to go to work tomorrow morning and I've got to be in the office at 8 a.m. And I was dreading the night before, I was dreading going to my job the next morning. And I only had the job like 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe. And in that moment, I said, it's, I'm distressed in this job. It's not fulfilling. It's just, I wasn't in burnout because I was new. I wasn't overwhelmed. It was just not fulfilling. Candidly, I don't use this word a lot, but I, air quote, hated the job. When I got inside, I couldn't see on the inside. When I was on the outside, I couldn't see what happened on the inside until I got on the inside. And I'm like, I just don't, it's not me. It doesn't fit me and who I am. And at the 30-day mark, I quit. Felt bad about it because this company specifically hired me for this role. I was interviewed by the president of a multi-billion-dollar company for this role. And I felt a bit bad about it. But the thing was this, I had to look out for me. And within 2 weeks after quitting that soul-sucking job, I found a job that filled me up in extraordinary ways. And I just happened upon it. It wasn't something I looked for. I was just piddling around for a couple of weeks after I quit my corporate job. I went to a seminar on transformation, and it was at a place called the Hypnosis Institute in New York City. They're not around anymore. But I met the husband and wife who ran it. I'd already had a great deal of experience with hypnosis. Long story short, they hired me to work with them. And those were 3 of the best years in my life working in that industry. And I made a lot less money. I mean, a whole lot less money. But I made enough to live in New York City, put a little money in the bank. But I loved what I did on a daily basis. I loved my life. And if many people chase money, and if you ask me if I'm going to chase money and hate it, or I'm going to actually love my life and love what I do and make a lot less money, I'm going to take the latter, and I'm going to love what I do, even if I make a lot less money. So professionally, look at, am I fulfilled? Is there a lot of stress and distress at work? Am I in burnout? Am I in overwhelm? If you're in any of those scenarios, hello, that's a signal that, you know what? Something has to change. And if something doesn't change, you are not in the right place. And candidly, I've said this before, I'll say it again. You're wasting your life. Next, and these are big ones to me personally, is we have to look at, what about growth? What about alignment? Now, when I speak about growth, I look at, okay, because this is what people want. They want the opportunity for advancement. We as human beings are always looking to go to higher emotional states. A baby, when it's crying in the crib, it wants to go to a higher emotional state. And that could be that they're wanting to be held or wanting to be fed, they're wanting their diaper changed. But make no mistake, they want to grow and they want to go to a higher emotional state. So we all want that. And what I look at in jobs is there a lack of growth? Is the opportunity, the job, is that aligned with my own values and my own goals? And what I look at here is the growth. All of us want the opportunity to contribute. And there's been a lot of research on this. After a certain point, money is not of value to people. Once they hit a certain level of what they would call security, comfort, whatever it might be, then more money is not going to make them more productive. And again, a great deal of research has been on this. People want to belong. They want commonality. They want to feel like they're part of something, and they want to feel like they're contributing. My entire team, I love my tech manager, Tom. Tom has been with me since day one. And Tom has always said, as long as you do this and as long as I'm welcome, I'll be by your side. And candidly, we've had a lot of business ups and downs, but we've done extraordinarily well. And we've had years like this past year that's very challenging. There's a lot of changes happening in the world. And Tom is very dedicated and very committed. And he's always said, what we do, people need. And, Tom doesn't see it like I do, but the amount of messages that I get from people that listen to the podcast saying, like, for example, Chris Griffin, a while back, he's got the second most downloaded podcast on Australia. I've coached Chris, and actually I'm at number 4, I think, in the health category in Australia. He's number 2. Mel Robbins is number 1. Chris is like, I've been listening to you since I was 17. And I attribute a certain amount of Chris's success to my mentorship from the podcast, but also I've coached Chris personally. He's an amazing man. And so I look at, okay, am I growing and do I have the opportunity to grow? But where I was leading to is the values. Many years ago, when I waited tables out of college, I waited tables at a very high-end restaurant in Atlanta, Georgia called Chops. And when you're a young person waiting tables, quite often your guests, people there, they will start chatting with you. If they're not having a business dinner, often they will chat with you. Or if they're a really good sales manager, they're always on the lookout for really good sales potentially aligned talent. I've taught sales for many years, by the way. And so I was constantly getting job offers when I worked at Chops. And in that place, by the way, for any of you that are really young and you're like, okay, I can't find a job that I want. I can't get a call back. I can't get my foot in the door. A great place to meet people that do hire and make hiring decisions is working in a restaurant. Because in a really good restaurant, you will get access to people that you probably couldn't even get through their front door otherwise, professionally. And I worked at Chops in Atlanta, a very high-end restaurant. And I cannot tell you the amount of CEOs that I waited on, EVPs, executive vice presidents. And I was constantly given business cards. Jim, we do XYZ at this company. We'd like to visit with you. Or you have great communication skills or great presence or this skill or that skill. Or when you work in a high-end restaurant, you have to learn how to upsell food and upsell wine. It's part of what you do to raise your ticket level to raise, obviously, revenue for the house, more money for the restaurant, and bigger tips for yourself. So the better salesperson you are, the more you're rewarded financially. And that's pretty damn good at it, to be honest. But anyway, my values are what I do on this podcast and in the transformational coaching program and the insiders group and the Becoming Unstoppable program. What I do is 100% aligned with my values and who I am and what I feel and what I believe and how I live. Now, about values, I didn't want to go sell cell phones. I didn't want to go sell Nordic Track. I didn't want to go sell all these things where it's constantly offered opportunities. I didn't want to do it because it didn't light me up, because it didn't represent my values. Now, when I took this job in New York, it didn't represent my values. It represented a shit ton of money for me at that point in my life. And I acted outside of my values, and I paid the price for that because I quit within 30 days. You've got to act within your values or you're going to be very unhappy. So I look at professionally, are there growth opportunities? Is there alignment with my values and my goals? And what I'm sharing with you right now definitely applies to many people listening, because many people listening are also spiritual entrepreneurs. And many of us know that we can't do anything other than what we do professionally, whether it's chiropractic or acupuncture or massage or hypnotherapy or whatever, tapping, whatever it is, acupuncture. We know that we have to live by our values because this is who and what we are. And professionally, if you're unfulfilled and you're not happy, guess what? You're not getting your goals and your values met where you are currently, and it's time to leave. The relationship, if you're not getting your goals and your values met, we'll talk more about that, it's time to leave. Now, a final one here, also at work, might be feeling undervalued. And this can apply to work, and it can even apply to your marriage. Are you valued where you are? I want to say owning a company, and just complete transparency, is I've always told the team that the most important thing on this team for me is that we have quality of life. Because without great quality of life, nothing else matters to me. And that's always been a principle for people in the company. I'm not perfect. And there are times that I've gotten super busy and I've taken my eye off the ball. There might have been times in the past where I didn't have the right team member and the right slot on the team. And I eventually recognized we've got to shuffle some things around here. But I've always been consciously aware of hiring and bringing people onto the team that are aligned with the values of what we do here in the podcast and our other programs, and that is serving people. So ask yourself, though, about value. Do you feel valued where you work? And if you don't, I'm not advocating quitting, but what I am advocating is talk to your direct management and let them know you feel undervalued. And sometimes you can talk to management and they don't care. And in that moment, if that were me, that would be a sign that, you know what, it's time for me to go. Management doesn't care how I feel or what I need or what I think. I'm not growing. I'm not fulfilled. It's an overwhelming job. They expect a lot of me and I'm underpaid. It's time for me to leave. So ask yourself professionally, are you feeling valued? Do you have the growth, the alignment? Are you achieving your goals? And are you valued? And if you're not, well, then it may be time for you to go. So what are some warning signs that you want to look for? And in the first one, that applies to me personally. It doesn't right now, but it did many years ago in my own personal relationship. But the warning signs are with your work, your career, your personal life, even your health. When you address improvement, are you seeing improvement, or is a solution from your employer being brought to help you actually find improvement or to support improvement? So what you want to look at is, after you've talked to the other parties involved, you want to look at the situation. And okay, I brought things to their attention, meaning your boss, your partner. I brought things to their attention. We both agreed that we both want improvement, but I'm not seeing it from their side. Well, that right there is a warning sign. And by the way, in personal relationships, that happens quite frequently. That might be a warning sign that it's time to move on. And I'll talk in a moment about things you want to things you want to look at. But well, I'll just say it now. Like in my personal life, we were at a point many years ago where it just was not working. We'd already been together probably, I don't know, we've been together 22 years, maybe 10 years. I don't recall, 10 years, whatever. And we were in a place where we just wasn't clicking anymore and it wasn't fulfilling for both of us. And we were starting to just eventually live, even though we lived in the same house, living independent lives in this same house. And we were more like roommates than anything else. We tried a particular therapist, didn't see any improvement, and things kind of malingered for a bit. We tried a different therapist and didn't see any improvement. And I was starting to think, okay, for how I want to live and for my values, this is not going to work for me. And then we finally tried another therapist, and this therapist understood completely who we are, and where we want to go. And things started improving dramatically. So what you want to look at, number one, is whatever challenges you're having or whatever needs you have that are not met, you want to bring them to the attention of your partner or your employer. And then you want to agree to solutions. You want to commit from your end to the solution. And if you don't see changes happening, that right there is a sign that things are probably not going to change. And when it comes to other people, first thing I look at is, okay, what do I have to do to change me? How do I have to change? Whether it be work, which I own my own company, but whether it be personal life, what shit do I need to own? What am I bringing that's causing part of the problem? How do I fix that? How do I improve that? How do I grow? How do I become more aware? But oftentimes I find in a relationship that, and if you're listening to this podcast and episode, you're definitely the kind of person looking to grow and improve. Now, whether or not you do, it's a whole different ball of wax. That's up to you. But many times we are in relationships with people that don't want to grow. They like things the way that they are. If you find yourself in that place and you've made attempts to improve it, and the other person doesn't, your handwriting is on the wall. Now, this one here never applied to me, but so that's warning sign number one is you talk about it and you agree that improvement needs to happen with your partner, your employer, whatever, whether it be improvements in your workplace or safety or whatever it might be, or your personal life, and nothing changes. That's a warning sign. It's a red flag. And your environment, is that a toxic environment? Are you speaking up? Now, that's never been one that's been literally, it's never applied to me. I've never been in my personal relationships other than my father in a toxic environment. Now, when I was 22, I knew I was in a toxic environment. Boom, time to go. But are you in a toxic environment at home? Do you have a partner that tears you down? Do you have a partner that constantly is nagging and berating you? Do you have a partner where you're just not good enough? Do you have a partner that'd rather just watch more TV than spend time with you? Do you have a partner who'd rather drink and drug and gamble, even though it's not a conscious choice, it's brain-based and it's become habituated and subconscious, but are you living with that partner? So look at the environment. After it's all been addressed, meaning your personal or professional, after it's all been addressed, is it changing or does it remain toxic? If it remains toxic, there's a clue and a warning sign right there. And then if you looked at, are there better alternatives available to you? Be careful here because what we often get into is the grass is greener on the other side. Well, the only reason the grass is greener on the other side is because they take better care of the grass. And that's why I said I've got to work on me. But what I look at though is are there other alternatives, other jobs, better kinds of relationships that I can be in, better and more supported people to have around me? When I say better people, more supportive, loving, and nurturing people around me. Now, making the decision. So number one is check your gut. How do you feel? How do you feel about the person, the relationship, the job, career, whatever it might be? When I worked in New York City, and I mentioned that night before, I'd go to work. How do I feel? I felt just worn out. Here's how I felt. I felt dread. I felt gloomy. I felt dread and I felt gloomy. That right there sort of told me, and I was a kid. Again, I was probably, I don't know, I wasn't a kid. I was 32, 33. And that right there, but I was tied to the money. And out of fear, I wanted to stay for the money. I'll address that in just a moment. But how I felt, my gut was, this is gloomy. I don't like this. And if you're in that kind of place, whether it be professionally or personally, that right there, that gut check is big. Next, evaluate your efforts. And I just mentioned the part of that. Have you done everything you can to improve your situation? Whether it be your personal or your employer or your business or your team or whatever, have you done everything you can? Most of the time, we play the blame game. Oh, it's not me, it's you. But I'm bringing the ball back to you. Have you done everything that you can to improve to the highest possible degree to bring the best you into the work environment or the relationship? If you can say yes to that and it still doesn't feel right, well, there's your answer. And then another one here, criteria, is why. Are you doing the relationship or the career, that position for you or for other people? Now, when it comes to relationships, what I see a lot of is that many people do it for the other person, meaning that they're doing it because they don't want to hurt their partner, so they stay in a relationship that's suffocating. That is the wrong reason to be into a relationship. If you're doing it for other people and you're sacrificing yourself, wrong reason to be in a relationship. And then finally, make sure that if you're unhappy at work or at home, make sure the problem is about the situation itself and not personnel or individuals. So just create that distinction in your mind. Is my problem with the career in XYZ industry, or is my problem with people in my company? Is my problem with my partner, or is it my environment or my life or how they live their life, or where I want to go with my life, which is different than where they want to go with their life? So you have to distinguish. Is the problem the situation or is it a person? Okay, so I told you a bit ago, we're going to start wrapping up here, about a litmus test. And I told you I had a question for you or an approach for you. And here it is. Whatever's bothering you, whatever's draining you, whether it be work, your relationship, whatever it is, people, whatever's draining you and bringing you down, imagine not having that in your life anymore. Take a second and do that. Exhale and imagine not having that partner, not having that boss, not having that commute, not having that lack of appreciation for your work, whatever it is, imagine not having it anymore. Now, how do you feel? Because that right there is your answer. That right there is your answer to stay or to go, or to keep going or to quit. Because if you feel, oh, man, what a relief. And when I quit that corporate job, I remember hopping on the subway going back to my apartment. And ego wise, I felt a little bad because the executive vice president of the company, he was rooting for me in his meetings with the president of the company. And partly I felt like I let him down. But again, I don't worry about it now. It's just business. Everyone's got to do what's good for them. Even companies do that. But I remember the subway ride home. Whew, how light I felt. And in that moment, I knew that I made the right decision. So your litmus test is, okay, if I didn't have that situation in my life, how do I feel? And if you feel much better, guess what? It's time to quit or time to move on to something else. Now, what a lot of people get into is they get into their fear, okay? And the fear actually keeps them in the situations they don't want to be in. And what this calls for, what I'm talking about, to cut the old out of your life and move into the new, what it calls for is courage. So we want to make sure also when we cut people and things out of our life that we're not running away from something. Where we want to go is into healthy exploration of what are my alternatives? What are my options? In what ways can I be and in what ways can I live a better, more fulfilling, more empowered life, whether it be personal or whether it be professional? Okay, now I'm going to wrap up here, but stay with me. This is important, please. So for me, I've been doing this podcast now for about 7 years, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to bring what I bring to people in this podcast. We literally have impacted people. If I look at where the podcast is downloaded, it's been downloaded in 37 different countries. We are over 6 million downloads, and that's with me not having guests for the most part. That's not with other people coming on and they have their own tribes and I interview them and they share. I mean, that's just me for the most part of the work that I do. We've done some extraordinary things, but it's time for something a little different. Now, I'm going to continue to do the podcast and I'm grateful and I love doing it. But a direction that I want to go is a fulfilling direction to me. And I may lose some people, and that's fine. I understand that and I respect that. But a direction that I want to go, and I'm probably going to fumble a little bit as I do, but that direction would be working with either spiritual entrepreneurs or people that are evolutionary oriented, meaning they are all about self-evolvement. Candidly, I get sick and freaking tired of having to talk about money and 3D things that are so primal so often that I'm going to stop doing it, and to a medium degree, probably. And what I want to start doing is bringing you guys and marrying it with science, but ancient wisdom. And specifically, because it's been my path for 30 years, the ancient wisdom of shamanism as it applies today. What I would call it is I would like to go the direction, and I am going the direction of applied spirituality, meaning ancient principles that I can validate with modern science to help you guys live a more balanced life, both personally and spiritually, as you're often creating things in the external 3D world. So anyway, I'm going to take a week or two off. We're still going to have the throwback episodes, but I'm going to take a couple of weeks off. You might miss me for a week or two with a regularly scheduled podcast, but starting the first week of November is when we're going to be rolling out new episodes, new music for the podcast. It's going to be the same name, but it's going to have a different look and feel to it to some degree, I think. We'll see what happens. Okay, on the Secret Podcast, I want to talk about something I touched on here, which is the concept of fear. And fear is what stops most people. Here, I just very quickly said you've got to have courage, but I want to talk about that more on the Secret Podcast. You can listen to that by going to jimfortin.com/insiders, jimfortin.com/insiders. And your transformational takeaway here is your big litmus test is, whether it be your personal life or your relationship, ask yourself how you would feel if you were not in that situation anymore. That right there will be your litmus test. Do I stay or do I go? Thanks for listening. I'll catch you over on another episode. Bye-bye.